The stock market keeps breaking records. Home values are sitting near all-time highs. Household wealth has climbed to levels we've never seen before. If you only looked at the headlines, you probably assume the average American is doing better than ever. So why does it feel like the exact opposite? Why are so many families living paycheck to paycheck? Why are people with decent jobs still worrying about groceries, rent, and unexpected bills? And why does every headline about a booming economy seem completely disconnected from real life? The answer is surprisingly simple, because there isn't just one American economy anymore. There are multiple economies happening at the same time, and which one you're living in depends almost entirely on what you own. Let's start with something that seems impossible to explain. Consumer confidence has remained incredibly weak despite strong economic numbers. Normally, when stocks rise, unemployment stays low, and businesses keep growing, people feel optimistic. But that's not what's happening. Millions of Americans say life feels harder than it did just a few years ago. At first glance, that doesn't make sense. How can the economy be thriving while so many people feel like they're falling behind? The answer is that the economy isn't rewarding everyone equally. Some people benefit enormously when asset prices rise. Others barely notice. Imagine two neighbors living on the same street. One owns a diversified investment portfolio, a retirement account, and a home. The other rents an apartment and keeps most of their money in a checking account because every paycheck is needed to cover monthly expenses. Now imagine the stock market jumps another 20%. The first neighbor becomes significantly wealthier without doing anything different. The second neighbor wakes up with exactly the same bills, except many of those bills keep getting more expensive. That's the difference. Economic growth doesn't automatically reach everyone. Much of today's wealth is created through appreciating assets. And if you don't own many assets, you're watching someone else's wealth grow, not your own. This becomes even clearer when you look at who actually owns the market. While millions of Americans have retirement accounts, ownership isn't evenly distributed. A relatively small portion of households owns the overwhelming majority of stocks and investment assets. That means when financial markets hit record highs, the gains don't get shared equally. Two families can watch the exact same news report about the Dow Jones reaching another milestone. One family celebrates because their investment portfolio just grew by tens of thousands of dollars. The other changes the channel because nothing in their life has improved. Same country, same economy, completely different experience. That's why headlines can feel so disconnected from reality. There's another reason this divide feels so noticeable today: inflation. Over the last several years, the cost of everyday life has increased dramatically. Housing, insurance, utilities, healthcare, groceries. Almost every essential expense became more expensive. Yes, wages have increased for many workers, but for countless households, those raises simply haven't kept pace with rising living costs. Imagine receiving a 3% raise, only to discover your monthly expenses increased by 4 or 5%. Technically, you're earning more. Practically, you feel poorer. And that's exactly how many families describe their situation today. Their paycheck grew, their purchasing power didn't. This creates a strange illusion. The economy appears strong from a distance because many of the indicators economists track are doing well: corporate profits, stock prices, household net worth. But those numbers don't necessarily reflect the financial health of the average family because averages can hide enormous differences. If one person gains $1 million while hundreds of others gain nothing, the average still rises. That doesn't mean everyone became wealthier. It simply means wealth became more concentrated. And that's one of the biggest reasons people feel disconnected from positive economic news. The headlines describe the overall picture. Most families experience only their own. If rising investments aren't paying the bills, how are people continuing to spend money? That's where things become more concerning. Consumer spending has remained surprisingly resilient. Restaurants are still busy. Stores still have customers. Travel continues. At first glance, that suggests households are financially healthy, but spending doesn't always tell you where the money came from. Sometimes it came from tomorrow, not today. And that's where the real story begins. The easiest way to spend money you don't have is debt. And that's exactly what's been happening. Credit card balances have climbed to record levels. For many households, credit cards are no longer being used for vacations or luxury purchases. They're being used for groceries, utility bills, car repairs, medical expenses, things people simply can't avoid. Financial experts have started calling this survival debt, debt taken on not to improve your lifestyle, but just to maintain it. The problem is that high-interest debt creates a dangerous cycle. Every month, more of your paycheck goes toward paying interest instead of building savings. That leaves less money available for emergencies. Then another unexpected expense appears, and the cycle starts all over again. For millions of families, debt isn't solving financial problems, it's delaying them. Another trend has quietly exploded over the last few years: buy now, pay later services. Originally, these payment plans were meant for larger purchases like electronics or furniture. Today, many people use them for everyday necessities: groceries, clothing, household essentials. On the surface, splitting a payment into smaller installments sounds convenient, but when dozens of small payments begin stacking together, it becomes surprisingly difficult to keep track of what you actually owe. Eventually, next month's paycheck is already committed before it even arrives. There's savings. Financial advisors often recommend building an emergency fund that can cover several months of living expenses. Unfortunately, many households never reach that point. After paying rent or a mortgage, insurance, transportation, food, childcare, and everything else, there's simply very little left. That's why one unexpected medical bill, a broken transmission, or a temporary job loss can throw an entire family's finances into chaos, not because they were irresponsible, but because they had almost no financial cushion to begin with. This is why it often feels like there are three completely different versions of America. At the top are households that own significant investments and real estate. When stock prices rise, their wealth rises with them. When home values increase, their net worth grows again. Many of their assets appreciate even while they sleep. The economy feels strong because it's directly increasing their wealth. Then there's the middle. These households earn decent incomes. They work hard. They save when they can. But rising costs constantly eat away at their progress. Every raise feels smaller than expected. Every major purchase feels more expensive than the last one. They're not falling apart, but they're finding it harder to move forward. Then there's the bottom group, families with little or no investment assets, very limited savings, and growing debt. For them, rising stock prices don't create wealth. They simply watch everyday expenses continue climbing while trying to stay afloat. Three groups, one country, three completely different financial realities. This explains why economic headlines often feel disconnected from everyday life. When reporters say the economy is booming, they aren't necessarily wrong. Many economic indicators genuinely are strong. The problem is that economic growth isn't experienced equally. If your wealth is tied to appreciating assets, booms can feel incredible. If your income comes almost entirely from wages, life may feel just as difficult as before, or even harder. So, what does all of this actually mean? It means focusing only on your paycheck isn't enough. Building financial security increasingly depends on owning assets that grow over time. That doesn't require becoming wealthy overnight. It starts with consistency. Building an emergency fund, avoiding high-interest debt whenever possible, investing regularly, even in small amounts, living below your means when you can. None of these steps are exciting, but together, they slowly move you from relying entirely on earned income toward building wealth that works for you. The biggest lesson isn't that the economy is fake or that the headlines are lying. It's that national averages don't tell individual stories. Two families can earn similar incomes and still have completely different financial futures depending on what they own, how much debt they carry, and whether their money has time to compound. That's why one family celebrates record highs, while another wonders how they'll pay next month's bills. Same economy, different realities. And once you understand that difference, let the headlines start making a lot more sense. If you found this breakdown helpful, consider subscribing for more videos where we simplify complex economic topics into practical, easy-to-understand insights.